So hello, welcome to this National League Rugby video with myself, Chris Heal. And as you can see, I am joined by National League Rugby Chairman, John Inverdale this morning. John, great to speak to you as always. It feels like June and July have flashed before our eyes, and we're now, as the time we are recording, it's only two and a bit weeks away till the season gets underway again.
I know, and it's really extraordinary that I seem to have spent the last 2 weeks talking about nothing except hard pitches and were they going to stop the start of the season. And you sort of wind back 12 months and you think, oh, this is kind of COVID in a different guise. I mean, the last 12 months have been very strange, really, in many ways for the game, in terms of the approach that the game's had to deal with other much bigger issues, financially, obviously. But I think there's a genuine sense of optimism, especially at our level of the game, about what the next 8-9 months have to offer, and I'm genuinely excited about it. I think all four leagues, in their different ways, have fascinating new elements to them. I think the battle to win National 1 and to get into the Championship is really intriguing this year. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and I just kind of to pick the bones out of that first answer you gave there, John, and you mentioned kind of looking back to last year and, 12 months ago, it was still a little bit uncertain how the season was going to start. Different teams were going through different stages of the return due to the COVID restrictions. And yes, COVID did seem to strike back just before Christmas, but we did get a full season in its entirety. And that's all I think everybody who was associated with National League Rugby wanted when September begun last year. So was it great to have that first season back, John? And have you got any kind of reflections on it?
Well, my reflections are that for a huge part of the first 2 or 3 months, you kept thinking COVID was going to return in such a way that the season would not be completed. That's and it's easy to say that now because it was all right in the end. Mm-hmm. But I kept thinking that we were going to spend February and March having thousands of meetings about was the season complete if 66% of matches had been done, and were we going to promote teams and were we going to relegate teams, or was the season going to be void again? And I mean, genuinely, I did wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes thinking, oh God, what on earth is the answer to this? and really there was no answer. And then mercifully, it didn't quite take a grip in the way that it might have done. And so we got through to the end. And I think, by the end of the season, obviously 1 or 2 teams were disappointed with, relegation or whatever it might be. But I think fundamentally, most clubs were pretty resolute, and at the end of the season thought, hey, we got through this and we're quite strong as a consequence of it. I think in moments of stress and real tension, a lot of it being financially induced, at the end of it, some clubs have come out a lot stronger in terms of infrastructure and the way that they're run. So, from every cloud, there are some silver linings.
Yeah, and you talked about the challenges there, John, in terms of like financially and things like that, but how much of a testament was it to the clubs for the rugby they produced on the 80 minutes, on the field? Because as you touched on in your first answer, there was fabulous conclusions to all the seasons. The National 1 title race went down to the wire in the fixture list gods, if they even exist, threw up Sale FC versus Caldy the second to last day of the season. Hull's story was a fabulous one in National 2 North, and then Esher and Redruth right down to the wire in National 2 South. So it was just from start to finish, there always seemed to be something on the line.
It was a brilliant season, and I also do think that, I think I went to 27 clubs during the course of the season, and I don't think, maybe I got lucky, but I don't think I went to one match where I thought, God, that was an absolute stinker. Actually, I'm lying. There was one. I won't name names. It did involve Esher, but it was apart from that game, I got back in the car after every game, wherever I'd been, and I thought, that was good. And sometimes it was better than good. And I think that's the challenge for the National League Rugby as an entity, is to get people to understand, not people from within, because anybody can preach to the converted, but people who are outside our level of the game, upwards and downwards, by the way. I think it's important to get respect from, people involved in the Premiership and the Championship as well. But I think to realize just how good some of these teams are, some of these players are, and also, without getting back on a hobby horse again, about how important, we've now got 52 clubs in the national leagues, how important the national leagues as an entity are for promoting the sport. I think, we all have responsibilities towards our own clubs. whatever that might be. And in a sense, and sometimes that inner responsibility will overshadow a greater responsibility when it probably shouldn't, because our main responsibility, all of us, is to the game as a whole, to show it in the best possible light in terms of what happens on the field, but also what happens off the field. And I think National League Rugby is an amazing shop window, if you like, for rugby union in this country, not just in its geographical spread, but also in actually what it can offer for every sector of society.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that, John. And of course, the National League Rugby Review Show is hopefully a tool, but obviously a promotional side of things from our point of view. Launched last season for the first time, Warren putting in an incredible shift for kind of 30 weeks plus to get the show up and running. Obviously, we changed it slightly this year with it going onto YouTube. But do you think, again, the way we're trying to adapt to make it more accessible to people can only help what you just talked about there of promoting the game and showcasing the quality that all of these clubs produce on a weekly basis?
Well, there are so many elements to a National League club, and you can make that wider in terms of the whole setup. You know, there's the playing side, there's the spectating side, there's sponsorship, there's engagement from local communities, businesses, whatever it might be. And we have to engage with all those elements are very important in making the cake whole. So, you know, the review show is just one strand of that, but I do think it's very important because it offers a shop window for the game as a whole to the widest possible constituency. Anybody can log on YouTube and watch something and go, God, I didn't know that's a cool looking stadium. That's a great product. Whoa, that was a great try. Anybody can do that. And this gives us an opportunity to do that. And it's the envy of lots and lots of other sports and elements within rugby union as well. I think it's a big opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to show existing sponsors, but also potential sponsors, what the national leagues are about. The key word in there is national. You know, I mean, we really are. I keep saying it, but, you know, you go from Tynedale this time to North Walsham, to Canterbury, to Redruth, you know, to Bridgewater, to, you know, or Barnstable rather. You go all the way around Chester. You know, you're just doing a circle of the country and all points in between. This is a great opportunity to get your name, your product, whatever it might be out there. And I think this is you know, the review show is an important part of us doing that. But it's also the responsibility again. I think responsibility is a big word. But I think there's a responsibility on all clubs at this level. But when you know, you can be playing at level 8, 9, 10, whatever, wonderful clubs with a heart and a soul that's absolutely integral to the game. I think the moment you start playing at levels 3 and 4, the responsibility element to the game, if you like, becomes greater because you're more visible. People look at your results more, you know, even down to, you know, your results are on the BBC website. That may sound trivial, but you're there and people can see it, and people say, oh, I didn't know there was a rugby club there or there, whatever it might be. So suddenly the responsibility element just increases and notches up a bit. And so that's where things like facilities are very important. You know, once you start playing National League Rugby, there is a responsibility to actually make your ground better than it might have been, you know, when you were purely, inverted commas, recreational. And, you know, we are trying from an exec's point of view to try and make the sport at our level more professional with a small p. Always say that, but it's important to say that, but with a small p. And that's why this year, and people, if they haven't had it already, will receive it very, very shortly. You know, we finally got through minimum medical standards for playing at levels 3 and 4, which will be recommended for this season, but mandatory for the following season, 23-24, when there will be sanctions imposed if you don't comply with them. And that's not being draconian. That's saying we've got players at this level who are very good, who are employees of your club, however little you might be paying them, and you have a direct responsibility towards them as, inverted commas, employees of the club. So just it's elements like that. It's about slightly just shifting the overall mindset about how important people, or how important this level of the game is, and therefore people need to understand the extent of that importance.
Yeah, and you talked about the medical standards there, John, but I guess it's kind of, we're always, as National League Rugby and as you guys at the exec, are looking to take the league to the next level. And as you say, these small elements are hopefully just going to keep progressing and progressing and progressing, whether that is a review show or, as you say, those little things that make it a little bit more professional with a little P.
Yeah. And the thing about the medical thing is as well, if I'm a player, I've played a couple of seasons in the Premiership. I'm 28, but I can kind of see that I'm on the down escalator. Am I going to play National League 1 to my local club, whatever it might be? I might turn up there one evening and go, this is not a great setup. I'd quite like to carry on with my career, but the medical room, there's barely some elastoplast there, and my body is in a bit of a state anyway. So I think probably thanks an awful lot, but I won't bother. You turn up and you look at things looking very, very slick and clean and smart, and you think, I hadn't quite realized when they rang me up, whoever they are, when they rang me up and said, look, we gather you're thinking about ending your career. Why don't you play for a couple more seasons? You're near down the road. We train twice a week. Your experience would be invaluable. Come down and look. And they come down and look and they see a really neat, well-organized, well-facilitated opportunity to extend their career for a couple of years. That might be the difference between saying yes and no. So there are lots of so much of this, apart from a responsibility to the sport as a whole, so much of this is a kind of self-help thing. Why would you not want to be better at this or better at that or have an improved that? Because actually, ultimately, it might cost you a few quid up front, but you will more than make that up down the road. And so, I think it's about all of us realizing that, this is an opportunity for us. It's a responsibility, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that might tie into kind of the small success we had last year as well, John, with the live streaming at Rams and versus China. You talked about like highlighting a club, and Rams seem to be a club which have put a lot of thought into the facilities and making it a ground that players and staff and everybody else wants to come to. And I guess if clubs do want to maybe roll the dice and want to show off how good their club is, both on and off the field, whether that's community work, whether that's mini and juniors, maybe saying actually the live streaming would be a fantastic way to do that, because the Rams China game was brilliant on the field, but the stuff we were able to showcase away from the pitch was as equally as important.
And I think the key thing as well is, these are national leagues, albeit regional national leagues at level 2. But there are still some very, very long journeys that clubs are having to undertake. So instead of automatically looking at the fixture list and going, oh, we're going to X this weekend, that's costing us a fortune. Why not look at it down and say, right, that weekend we're going to X, that's going to cost us a lot of money. Why don't we recoup some of that money by live streaming the match back to our clubhouse, getting 100 people in there, charging them $5 each to watch it, and you get the money over the bar and the food and whatever it might be. And so offset, maybe even equal out the cost of the away trip by actually live streaming the game back to your local club. Don't look at it as a negative. Don't look at streaming and say, oh, it's too complicated and it's going to cost us money. Don't look at it like that. Look at it as, actually, this is an opportunity to actually recoup some of the money on that away trip. And it's another Saturday when we can have the club alive around the first 15, when actually they're playing 250 miles away. So I think it's all about attitude, and it's all about approach, and it's all about seeing everything as as an opportunity. And it might not work for everybody, but but the whole thing here about it is not just dismiss it, but just look at it and say, now, how could we make that work? Because it really can.
Yeah, we've had a decent response so far from a few clubs who have been interested in kind of the package and the product that we're looking to build this year. So it's been a decent response. But if any clubs are watching this and want to find out more, just we'll put obviously the emails in the description of the video to get in touch with myself and Max at Talking Rugby Union, who are having some really good and exciting conversations. And fingers crossed we can get a few more live streams to showcase how amazing and the quality of rugby is and how brilliant these clubs are in the national leagues. John, obviously the main change, I think, obviously going into this season is the restructuring of there's less teams in the leagues. There's obviously one extra league now in National 2. So just kind of explain why this, if you can, why the decision was made. But I guess it's also listening to the players' feedback about what they want and trying to make everybody as flexible and make it as enjoyable as possible.
Well, the players were in many ways the driver of this, and that's the key thing for, the odd club accountant who's saying we've got 2 less home games this year. Yeah, I get that. You've also got 2 less away games, mind you. So in some cases that might balance out a bit. But we get that totally. But the players were saying, and a lot of directors of rugby as well, at a time when player welfare and everything else is absolutely the top of the agenda the whole time. The players were saying they were exhausted playing 10, 12, 14, 15 games consecutive weeks, and they wanted a break. The moment you say you want a break, you have to find those breaks, systematically throughout the season. And in the end, coming down to 14 teams in a league made sense on many, many levels. I do totally accept that by the vagaries of the fixture list, there will be some weeks or some months rather when clubs look at their list and go, we've only got 1 game all month, and that economically is hard. It's really hard. All I would say in those situations, if they're months when there are internationals on, the autumn internationals, in England have got New Zealand and South Africa amongst others, and you've then got the Six Nations. If those are the months when you are down to 1 game, then it's really now thinking, right, almost let's treat that weekend's England international as a home game for us. And how do we get people into the club to get money through the door, to get money over the bar, etc., etc. It's about trying to be proactive in those instances. And the other thing as well was, and there are 1 or 2 clubs whose travel requirements are going to be probably pretty similar, and in some cases might be even more than last year. But again, that's just the vagaries of how things have panned out. But for a lot of clubs, there's a lot less traveling this year. And that means less time on the road. It means for players, less time away from their families, etc., etc. So this whole review was on the basis of the welfare in the widest possible context of the people who actually play the game.
Yeah, and from a National League fan point of view, we'd love to see kind of the week after week after week action, because it just generates that excitement. But even though we have these breaks, John, just looking at a few of the fixtures this season, you've got historical clubs like Blackheath going against, a new club coming into the league for this season, North Walsham. So there's so many different subplots to get really excited about, despite there being less games.
Yes, and I think that's the key thing as well, is our responsibility involved in promoting the game, but also the individual clubs. It's, this is why fundamentally for me, the whole thing about the concept of National League rugby is so important. That if you're playing for Blaydon, do you know how Guernsey are getting on at the moment? And you might think, well, I'm not really bothered because they're not in my league, and why do I care? But actually, we'd like you to care, because we'd like everybody to care. We'd like everybody to be interested, so that if you're involved at Worthing, you actually know that Fylde are playing whoever they might be playing this weekend. I'm deliberately going to sort of geographical ends, but it's about that. It's about not being insular. It's about not looking in, but about looking out. How can we because if we can make national leagues 3 and 4 a commodity that people want to be interested in, then we can get a name sponsor. Then we can get money invested into promoting the sport. Then we can get more people aware of the sport and coming to your club to go through your gate, to pay you money, to buy drinks over the bar, da-da-da-da-da-da. We're all in this together. And the more that we can make this entity more resonant with the wider sporting public, the more every single person will benefit from it. And I think that would be the one, go-to ambition for the next 12, 18 months.
Yeah, definitely, John. And just a couple more from me. You talked about that, everyone coming together, and we saw kind of last weekend, and I know they've got a friendly next weekend, but Plymouth Albion, who have been in the Championship here, been in the National League for quite a while, playing Exeter University, and even at a pre-season game, I think it was like 42-36 and went down to the last minute. And it just shows that kind of no matter what status these clubs are at, no matter how long they've been in National Leagues or whether this is their first year at this level, it just can bring out the best. And if everyone can work together and produce something like that just in pre-season, it should bode well for the rest of the year.
Well, I mean, the games, in many ways, the thing, I worry less about what happens on the field than I do what happens off it. And I do think one of the great things for us across the board, it's like, if you run a shop and you walk into a shop and whoever it is behind the counter ignores you, And you'll say, hang on a moment, what about me? I've just come in. I'm about to spend some money for you, and you're not even acknowledging. You're not even saying good morning. You're not even looking up from your phone or your paper, whatever it might be. You know, we are essentially corner shops that run from a monetary point of view once a fortnight. You know, in simplistic terms. So every time somebody comes through our door, it's got to be, hi, thanks for coming. Great to see you. Are you involved with the away team? Are you not? You've never been here before? Oh, great. Well, you know, where do you live? Just down the road. Fantastic. You know, it's about all that business. And that's again why it comes down to, you know, what does your clubhouse look like? What's the first impression that anybody gets when they turn up? And we're businesses, in some cases with a capital B, and in a lot of cases with a capital B. And so we have to be a bit more proactive and an understanding of how businesses operate. We can't, I think at this level, and I think this is the key thing, at this level, we're not just a little, you know, recreational rugby club and, you know, turn up if you want, and if you don't want to, you know, we'll see you sometime. We have to be more, we have to take control of our destiny, if you like, more than that. And I hope that by being collectively aware of that, that we can make National League Rugby something that people out within rugby, but more importantly, outside rugby, become more aware of.
Yeah, 100% agree with that, John. And hopefully everyone can listen to John's words and take that on board going into the brand new season, which, as we said right at the top, is only about 2.5 weeks away. The first day of the season, the 3rd of September. So, John, hopefully we're looking forward to it, and hopefully you're not going to be too busy between now and then, but I can only imagine you will be.
Yeah, well, I hate to say that I hope it rains a bit, because I really enjoyed the summer. But I think we need a bit of rain. I think there will be a lot of clubs who are anxiously looking at their pitches and thinking, you know, we want to start on time. We don't want to be, you know, behind the 8 ball. We don't want to be having to think about a mid-September start or whatever. So a lot of sunshine, but a lot of rain. If the sun could shine all day and then it could rain all night for the next fortnight, that would be perfect.
That's what's happened in the last couple of days in the northwest, John, as we spoke about on Monday. So hopefully it decides to make its way around the country for September 3rd. Well, John, it's an absolute pleasure as always to catch up with you. And as we said right at the start, this is going to be the home of the new National League Rugby Review show. So do follow us, do subscribe, do like to our channel, follow us on the journey. It's going to be a really exciting one. So thank you so much again to John.
Pleasure, Chris.